Woke, woke. There are so many things going on around. You must take heed. It's been written and prophesied about, so you must believe. Not everything that glitters is gold. Pay attention as it's been told. Join us every Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern, with Brother Yusuf as he tackles and breaks down current events, current news, and politics, and the Islamic Ummah. Please join us, streaming on all major platforms. Channel Sunnah followers.
Relevant to talk about in context of what we cover all the time. We'll still have time for questions, assuming we'll have some extra 15, 20 minutes in the end, maybe. God willing, we can always take as many questions as time permits. So, besides Eid, obviously, we're in the middle of another epic holiday season, if you will. The LGBTQ Pride Month kicked off. So we're going to have a couple of LGBTQ themes as they relate to government, as they relate to the New World Order. A couple of big Islamic themes also happened this week as well. Some immigration news, and of course, people may want to speak at the end on Trump and Elon, the real life soap opera that is playing out in real time. The news cycle nowadays just works so much faster, than it did when I was growing up. Typically, a news story would last for weeks. Now you get days go by and people already forgot about what happened on Sunday or Monday. It is really what social media has done. They can just throw so much at you, and your mind really doesn't even get a chance to digest story A before it's already story B, and then you're way behind story C comes out. So just a lot going on this week. But as I said, we kicked off Pride Month. This is a joyous occasion in the West. It's taken on religious connotations in some places, like Canada, where when Justin Trudeau, unfortunately, was in the office, he dedicated the entire summer to this. And really, I mean, if you go back to the 1980s or the 1970s and you ask an adult during that time period, would they ever live to see a day where there would be an entire month dedicated to homosexuality? I think everybody would have said you're crazy. Even me, who had been kind of in the know by the early 2000s when I was in my early 20s, I didn't think they would take it this far, this fast, where we really have a month. And you're seeing the corporations changing the logos to the rainbow flag. You're seeing places like Target. They used to have it. I don't know if they still do it. Last year they did. I try not to go to Target unless I can absolutely avoid it. But they had an entire section that was nothing but LGBTQ themed items and clothing and things like that. So, just a side note on this, which is kind of interesting. Going back to 1994, not May, but June was originally dedicated as Men's Mental Health Month. Kind of interesting, isn't it? That just not too long ago, before this was given to the LGBTQ XYZ community, this was actually known as Men's Mental Health Month. And as we're going to be really exploring this homosexuality is more of a male problem. And I'm going to throw some statistics out here in a few minutes, which are really going to bring that to light because it really is a men's mental health issue. So if you look at LGBTQ statistics, we're talking about the US here. We're focusing entirely on the US. 4.7% of men identify as gay LGBTQ, if you will. Now with women, we're going to unpack this. It's 8.5%. But when you look at the category breakdown of that, out of that 4.7% of the gay men, the vast majority are not bisexual. They are open homosexuals. But if you look at that 8.5% of women, you are seeing that the vast majority of this are identified as bisexual, while the men are typically homosexual. So when you look at the relationship between women and propaganda, there is a reason, obviously, everything that Allah and his messenger, on whom be peace, have given us in terms of guidance, in terms of revelation. When you put it to the test of time, it's always 100% going to be correct. And we're going to be looking at a lot of that guidance as we move on here tonight. Women are made to be governed and controlled by their men. And if it's not the men in the family, the brothers, the fathers, who are leading these women, somebody else is going to do it. You are going to find a third party, in this case, the government, the media, these Zionists, obviously, who are just licking their chops for an opportunity to lead women astray. And as men, we cannot continue to fail in this. I don't have any daughters, so I'm not in the position. I have only boys that I was given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's blessing, obviously, as they are. I don't have any girls. But for men out there who are fathers, it's time again to step up. Stop trying to be the best friend. Stop trying to be the buddy and the pal, and put the discipline back down again that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you the authority to do. We have to guide these women, because what we're seeing is, I'm going to break this down even more. This is purely an effect of propaganda, where the men's side of this is more of an effect of a mental health issue. In 2015, we're going to start, because this is really when it began, when you had the end of Obama's first or second term, where Obama was really stepping up this propaganda. At that period of time, 4.1% of women identified themselves as LGBTQ. The number has risen to 8.5% in just 10 years. Women follow trends. They're becoming bisexual, not because they actually have an urge. In most cases, when you explore these situations, it's because they're seeking male attention, because men have shown themselves in the last decades to like this activity of women engaging in these acts. But also, it's societal acceptance. It becomes like a little badge. You know, like when you win Girl Scout or Boy Scout medals, and you stick them up there on your uniform, and you go out in public and you show off your badges. That's basically what liberalism is. It's walking around with these different badges. Oh, I'm progressive. Oh, I believe in gay rights. Oh, I'm against climate change. Oh, I'm for Palestine. You see that now with the left, and they have no clue about the Palestine situation. They see it on a very surface level. It's a virtue signal. And with women, it's the same thing. While men, on the other hand, if we look at this time period where the brainwashing really escalated, 3.7% of men identified themselves as gay in 2015. Right now, I highlighted earlier, it's only 4.7%. So it hasn't raised that much. We're seeing that basically the same men almost that would have been gay in 2015 are the same type of men who would be gay in 2025. But on the other hand, you see the doubling, with the women, which is showing that the propaganda is working. And obviously the Zionists who heavily peddle this stuff, they have access to these statistics. They know their propaganda is working. They know they're going to continue to escalate it. I have people telling me who their kids are in high school, their kids are in middle school, and they're telling me all the girls are bisexual. Now in places like the UK, it's even worse because we've lost control. And like I said, if the fathers aren't doing it, the brothers aren't doing it, a third party is going to come in and they are going to lead these women. And that, unfortunately, is exactly what had happened. So now let's turn the page. It's still got a little bit of LGBTQ theme in it, as we're going to be in the first half of tonight. But Trump this week did something that goes to my 2030 agenda of a couple of months ago when I outlined what the 2030 agenda was. I exposed those who are implementing it and the ways that they're implementing it, particularly in the Muslim world. Well, Donald Trump gave the authority, the funding is there, for a company known as Palantir to collect data on Americans. Now, again, if you go back and you remember that 2030 talk, and I talked about the social credit system that was going on in China. And what that social credit system is simply you get credits for different things. And obviously with programmable money coming up here in the future, we've talked about that here at length as well, where they can actually turn your money off over time or just because of bad deeds or bad behaviors as they're trying to go into this kind of universal basic income system. That if you're a bad boy, well, they're going to go on the keyboard and they're going to enter some data in there and they're going to delete you. And you're not going to be able to do anything. There's story after story coming out of China, that terrible place, where you find numerous men are now homeless because their social credit score is so low that because they're dissidents, they may have criticized the government, they may have even been favorable of Islam. China obviously doesn't like us too much. Maybe they showed sympathy with the Uyghurs. And there you go, there's a minus there, two minuses here. all of a sudden you have no money. And you're completely dependent on them for every aspect of your life. And in the West, it's not going to be able to be done as easy because China has always been kind of a iron fist. You do as you're told or else. In the West, they pride themselves on freedom of speech and expression and love of the individual. You're not going to be able to sell it the same way. And we're going to see many wet methods tonight, how they're going to sell it and how they are selling it, how they're going to get this agenda across. But this Palantir company will start collecting data, medical, Social Security, all these different things. And now they're going to have they already have it. This is just letting the public know they have it. Some kind of intellectual profile, social profile on every single one of us. And the MAGA people are loving it. So the description of Palantir, the fact they chose this name is quite interesting. This was came up with, we're going to talk about the meaning of that in a second, by the Gotham software program. And it's designed, and this is where it gets scary, to look at behavioral patterns of people in real time, flag potential threats, goes back to COINTELPRO in the CIA, identifying potential troublemakers and neutralize them, and support decisions around public safety and fraud detection. So they're going to sell this, they already are, as it's going to protect you from the illegals stealing your social security numbers, which is happening, obviously. The illegals shouldn't be here. So I shouldn't have to worry about protection from them. If they do their job, they wouldn't be here. But they're going to sell it as that. It's for the good of you. It's going to be great. But when you start talking about analyzing behavioral patterns, who defines what is a safe or unsafe or good or not good? Behavior. Them. So if I say things that go against the official stance of the government, not treasonous things, but things I just criticize the policy, is that a negative behavior? Is that something I should be flagged for, just for having constructive criticism? If I'm promoting a viewpoint they don't agree with or counteracts their agenda, am I going to be flagged? Again, this is very shady language here. And of course, we know in the end of the goal, they have a goal. They're going from here to here. And they're going to take us there in a series of ups and downs, pushbacks, and apparent rises. The population defeated it, all that type of rhetoric stuff. And they're eventually going to get there. So again, analyzing behavioral patterns and flagging potential threats is extremely concerning language. Again, what else could be included in there? Criticizing Israel. We're going to look at that later and what happened in Boulder, Colorado. LGBTQ, anti-human activities. If I criticize global warming or climate change, could I be on that list? If I criticize 15-minute cities like I've done here on this platform, and all the restrictions and all the anti-human activities they're engaged in, am I going to be flagged now? I mean, they've already probably flagged me long ago, but when you start playing with someone's money and someone's destiny and someone's ability to feed their family because of their ideology, that is a problem, and that is absolutely frightening. Palantir comes from the author J.R. Tolkien. He is a famous medieval fiction writer. He had a concept of magical stones in his film or his books, that later became films, which allow you to see basically great distances. So again, they're telling you in this exactly what this is doing. They named it after stones, which allowed the user to be able to see visions of things that were going on at great distances. So here, this company is going to allow the government, the IRS, everybody, to be able to see everything that we are doing from a great distance. It's right there in the name. They choose the names of these companies very carefully. They know exactly, what they're doing. Well, who funded or created this company? Well, it's a gentleman known as Peter Thiel, also former CEO of PayPal. He was also the first outsider investor in Facebook, first person non-insider to invest in the Facebook project. I heard he turned like somewhere in the air 1,500 to 5,000 into just massive amounts of money because he was in there so early before the public even knew. They all work together like this. This is how they get so much more wealthier than us, is because they knew Facebook was a government program. They knew it was going to blow up. It was going to be released under Mark Zuckerberg's name. It was going to be, again, a way of tracking you, because they're never in this country, like I said, going back to my previous point, they're not just going to do the Chinese way, say you do it or else. No, they're going to get you to want it. They're going to get you to like it. They'll change the language, and then when you wake up to it, they'll pull it back like I said, it's just a series of this until they finally get where they're going. So if you know Facebook is going to be as big as it became, and you're an insider, and you're there from day one, you put your money in, bang. That money's going to multiply 10 times over. And all of a sudden, you've turned $5,000 into 100,000, to 200,000. And this is how they're so much more wealthy and powerful than us, because all the tricks of the game are rigged. They're involved in all of it. And they're always going to be a step ahead of us because of this reason. But it gets more interesting when we look at Mr. Thiel, the man behind the spying, if you will. He is an open homosexual, going with the theme of LGBTQ. He was married in 2017, and he had a relationship with a gay Instagram model named Jeff Thomas. Well, Mr. Thomas was found dead after falling from his Miami high-rise apartment on March 8th, 2023. Thiel, who's worth now $21 billion with a B, he had supplied Mr. Thomas with gifts, cars, and just about everything he wanted, according to the witnesses. So you find right here, obviously, there is a slight murder implication, perhaps, with Mr. Thiel. Another one of these many, and I mean many, we don't have time to name them, that'd be multiple hours worth of all these open homosexuals and closet homosexuals. We'll look at another one here in a minute, who are controlling journalism, who are controlling these companies. And needless to say, what agenda do you think they're going to push? The normalization is going to continue. Now, this guy, open homosexual, looks very shady of his lover, if you will's death, is now going to be working close with the White House and supplying software to collect data and analyze us and look for our behavioral patterns and a variety of other nefarious things. So it just continues to build and build and build. And he's one of those guys that you probably haven't heard of. But when you dig deep in his background, you're going to find this guy is everywhere. So he was at PayPal. He was the CEO of that, made a ton of money there. Big investor. He's responsible for J.D. Vance, Donald Trump's vice president candidate, rising up out of nowhere through the ranks. All of a sudden, boom, there he is. He's now, I never heard of the guy. Now he's a vice president front runner. And sure enough, he is the vice president. And now he's going to be actively working in the White House. Now, to continue with this LGBTQ theme, we had another gentleman that was in the news this week, Glenn Greenwald. You get a double whammy here. He is a Jew, most likely, obviously, a Zionist, open homosexual again, award-winning journalist, married gay father of two. That sounds beautiful, doesn't it? Married gay father of two. So obviously, we're going to explore that here in a second as well. So as customary, as you see with homosexual couples, and the West continues to allow this, obviously, despite most people being against this, at least that I talk to, what I've seen in some studies that's saying there's not a lot of people for it, but it seems like the vast majority of Americans are against this. But they adopted what? Girls? No, of course not. They adopted two young boys. Now, I want to keep this in mind for later on when we're going to talk about the fake Western outrage over some Muslim behavior of morality and decency later. But no one in the mainstream media has a problem with this. Probably you say 45% of Americans don't have a problem with this. All liberals practically don't have a problem with this. That you have two openly gay homosexuals, raising two young boys. That just simply, they're not their kids. There's no biological connection. Obviously, you see all the time that these guys go to third world countries to adopt these boys. Why do they do that? Because those boys have nowhere to run to. I remember a story made me just extremely angry. I probably would have done something bad and got myself in prison if I would have seen these two guys. But this gay couple in Georgia adopted a young Russian boy who didn't speak any English. They brought him over to this country. They sodomized him repeatedly. They let their friends sodomize him repeatedly. I mean, this boy, I looked at him. He looked like he had a disability. It set something off in me. This was a few years ago. I really felt nothing but rage and, anger toward the system, obviously toward these men as well. But these men are who they are. But the system allowed them to have custody of this young, looked like mentally challenged young boy who didn't know the language, didn't know the laws, had no connection, nowhere to go. In the case of Mr. Greenwald, it was two Brazilian boys. So we're seeing the same thing. So his husband had died in 2023. What did he die from? A gastrointestinal illness. Now, you may be wondering why I brought that up. Well, you get this illness from a few things, and we're kind of narrow them down and let your imagination do the rest. You get it from dirty water. It's also commonly known as food poisoning. I've had food poisoning from eating contaminated food before. But largely, it is human-to-human contact with fecal matter. And this gentleman's husband died of that. So needless to say, I'm not going to explore the details of possibilities here, knowing the homosexual lifestyle, what they're doing, and what's well known about what they're doing, that his condition is very common. And it's this byproduct of their activities. And we'll leave it there for the sake of decency. So he became the father of these two boys solo. So while the boys were asleep, Mr. Greenwald was filming explicit sex acts with a male prostitute, which go beyond any Muslim description of decency. Like I said, I'm not even going to describe the acts here. They're all online. You're not going to get it from me, but you can trust me, take my word for it. Just, very, very, were disgusting things while these two children were sleeping in the room. And knowing many other stories I've heard from this community, the children have probably seen this with their own eyes as well. And they engaged in humiliation, sexual rituals while smoking crystal meth. And methamphetamine, for those familiar with this community, is very, very common in the LGBTQ community because it gives you higher level of performance. It gives you more endurance, more alertness. It is a known thing that they engage in this activity. And if you can remember back when Barack Obama was in the office, they kept selling the agenda that they're just like us. They just want to get married and love each other and have a family and the white picket fence, and they want to live the American dream. But when you look at this is a prominent Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. This is a guy that was a hero among the left. They loved this man. They praised this man for how great of a journalist he was. And this is who he is. These are the people selling us news. These are the people doing this. So again, you saw this past week nonstop media defense of this man and his activities. Now, could you imagine just for a second, a straight family man was engaged in these acts with children in the house asleep? Everyone would be calling for the kids to be taken away. But when a member of this community does it, they say, oh, he's just an adult. He's just an adult. He's doing adult things. Well, I've been an adult for quite some time, and needless to say, I've never engaged in the activities that were described in these videos. I've never seen them, alhamdulillah, but never, needless to say, have I ever been involved in those type of activities. Now, could you imagine for a minute if this was a Muslim man? You would have every Christian apologist, nonstop, hour-long shows going over this. They would say Islam causes this. Islam represses human emotion. It represses human sexuality. You can't let Muslims adopt kids because if they don't do this, they'll turn them into a jihadi. And you'd hear all this rhetoric. But when this community does it, no, he's just an adult with two young boys happening to be in the house while he's engaged in drug use. Any straight parent would have had their kids taken from them. But again, you see this stuff going on all the time. It's so prevalent in our ruling class. It's worth an entire series. These guys are open. You can look at Chuck Schumer's wife as an example and see who he's married to. He's a very prominent Democratic politician. I think it's Matt Gaetz, the Republicans, not married. He adopted what again? Boys. Now he's not open with that, but he adopted two boys. He's unmarried. He's a man in his late 30s, early 40s, I believe. And again, it's so prevalent. You can go back through history. We could have the pictures. We could show Roosevelt's wife. We could show so many examples of these ruling elites marrying transgenders, posing as women. You see it now with Emmanuel Macron in France. You're seeing it with this guy here, that the people that are ruling us, they are demonic in all aspects of their life, not just the thievery and the corruption and the bribery and the lies, it goes across because this stuff is a disease. Once you start sinning, once you start disobeying the law, the filthy becomes beautiful, and you just can't get enough of the filth. You're always chasing the next thrill, and you just see it leads them further and further down a very dark path. Now, I want to keep that in mind as we segue into the next piece of news here and look at the difference in the reaction if you've seen this story. So Saturday night, this past Saturday, there was a Champions League soccer match. I'm American, so I wasn't aware that this Champions League is a big deal. I know what it is. It's like bigger than the Super Bowl globally. But here in America, we don't keep much up with what they call football. But there was a Champions League final. And during the post game, the UFC fighter, who is an open practicing Muslim, named Habib I can't even pronounce this last name, Nurmagomedov. I've heard of this gentleman before. He was a world champion. He was undefeated from Dagestan. Seems like a very good man. He's constantly giving his earnings to his community. You see this guy doing things all the time. He's not the type of bragging about it either. There's people exposing all his good that he's done for his community. He's really taken his money and really pumped it into youth programs to get his people out of poverty. It really seems like I don't approve of his career choice. He's retired now, but it seems like he's really taken that money and done a law's work with it. He seems to be a very stand-up guy. So we had this interview with British journalist Kate Scott, and she basically reached out and attempted to shake his hand. And Habib refused in a polite way. He said, "No, thank you. I'm Muslim. I don't do that." I don't know exactly what he said, but something to that effect. And again, he refused to shake hands with a woman. In the West, it's like, you're allowed to smack a woman on the backside. You're allowed to grope a woman. They'll say, "Oh, he's being a man." In some circles, the feminists will say, "Oh, no, he's a sexist chauvinist." But when you refuse, in Islam, you just can't win. The feminists will be out there saying, "Oh, no, men shouldn't be toxically masculine." Here is Habib respecting a woman, saying, "I'm not going to shake her hand." And basically they're saying, "Oh, you're bad too," because you just can't win, like with these people. So she apologized to him. She showed class in respecting his religious beliefs. She didn't seem to have a problem with it. But the media firestorm began. You saw comments in social media going to the effect of, "How dare we allow these people in our countries? This is how they view women. What culture is this?" And you saw so many tweets, like that coming down again on the Muslims. Like, how dare he not shake this woman's hand? You didn't see that same thing from these same leftists when it came to Mr. Greenwald earlier and all the things he was doing with young children. But don't shake a woman's hand. Oh my goodness. This is just horrible. During this same week, particularly in British society, which seems to be even more degenerate and vile than even Western American society, there was an English woman. I'm not going to name her name. I don't want anyone to go look her up. But she announced that she's going to be tied up. She's going to be tied up, hands behind the back, and she's going to be in a plexiglass cage. And 2,000 men can use her during a time period in any way she wants, but she's capping it at 2,000. Anything beyond 2,000 is too much. She has her standards, but 2,000 men will enter this plexiglass and they will do whatever they want. So the same exact culture where you see these tweets criticizing Habib is then not even condemning to the same level, this level of disgusting debauchery. And you want to say animalistic, but that's unfair to animals. Animals don't behave in this way. You don't see animals doing the things that Mr. Greenwald was doing. You don't see animals doing the things that this woman was doing. You don't see the animals doing things I'm sure Mr. Thiel was doing. So a lot of times people will say that's animalistic behavior. I really want them to stop using that phrase because that's unfair to animals. Animals behave the commands of Allah. They're doing exactly as they were created and made to do. Animals are not doing this. Only human beings are capable of this level of low, just going to these depths. The average Western man will have no problem with his daughter at 15, 14, even 13 maybe, bringing home a man or guy, going up to her room, closing the door. They'll have no problem with their daughter having 100 boyfriends or intimate partners by the time she's 100. That's no, by the time she's 25, I'm sorry. But this thing with Habib, no. He didn't shake the woman's hand. He should be kicked out. He shouldn't be allowed in the West. But this girl with 100 partners at the age of 22, 23, 24, 25, it's not even younger than that. That's commendable. She's expressing herself. She's finding herself. She's finding her love. She's finding true love. It just took a long list of partners to finally get there. And again, no problem with Glenn Greenwald. No problem with crystal meth in the house. No problem with having 1,000 different partners like most gay men do during the course of their lives. But don't dare try not to shake a woman's hand. So again, brothers and sisters, we are on the right side of history. These people have no moral high ground on us. And I'm so sick and tired of watching these imams and these cowards, out there. Just every time the West, particularly the left, throw their language out there, watching the Muslims just cower. Like they're letting them have the high ground. Oh, Islam is like that too. We're tolerant of LGBTQ. Oh no, we're tolerant. We're the religion of women's rights. You hear all this stuff. This just bowing down. It's sickening. These people have no moral high ground over us. We are on the right side of history. And it's a tough time right now. But in 100 years, none of us will be alive to quote me on this. But it's going to be vindicated. And we are going to see who really truly was on the right side of history. So now we're going to segue to one of the bigger stories of the week. There was an attack at a pro-Israel rally in Boulder, Colorado. Mr. Mohammed Sabri Suleiman, 45 years old, looked a lot older than that. I'm 46, and I think I look 10 years younger than this guy, so I always question sometimes these aspects. But he's 45 years old, according to the sources. Now, he was Egyptian and had previously lived in Kuwait for 17 years before moving to Colorado a year ago. He was one of countless unnameable illegals living in the United States. All him and his family were illegal, and they all should be deported. But obviously, that's a different story. So in this attack, 12 people in total, were injured. What he had done was he made Molotov cocktails as explosives and was throwing them, and also used a flamethrower, allegedly, in an attempt to kill them. And of course, here it comes. He was reporting to have shouted, "Free Palestine," while engaged in these acts of violence. So he's chanting "Free Palestine." I've talked about this at length for months, that eventually Palestine and support for Palestine will be something that will almost be illegal. We're going to get to what they're doing about this here in a minute, because it's going to that direction. That just even acknowledging the existence of Palestine, much less supporting it. You are a supporter of terrorism, you're a traitor, your speech should be silenced. And we have, again, this guy. He also allegedly attacked children during this as well, which is beyond reprehensible, if true. Now, as usual, as Muslims, we are expected to take responsibility for everything a person bearing a Muslim name does. I mean, I obviously condemn this. I'm sure everybody here on the platform condemns this, if this is true. Again, it's very convenient. Come to that in a minute. Very, very convenient as the tide continues to turn against the Zionists. More and more people are waking up, as I'm going to show some stats on that at the close tonight, of what percentage of countries have a favorable or unfavorable view of Israel. The tide is internationally turning. It's turning domestically. You're seeing, for the first time in my life, almost half of Republican people are even condemning Israel. They've taken it too far. So what better way to whip up that sympathy? Here it comes. How convenient. So again, the dust hasn't settled on this. We're only going with what they gave us so far. It could be obviously a lot more. So again, we are expected to take responsibility for this. But yet, no Christian, no atheist. I mean, there's people who are worshipers of the earth. And you see them all the time setting forest fires, trying to burn down people's houses because they say the housing is stealing from nature. Do they ever go out and paint all environmentalists in this light? Do they ever require an environmentalist to go on camera and say, hey, look, I'm sorry for what that nut job did? But only us. We are expected to defend or, go away from this. And of course I condemn it. This guy's a dirtbag. If what's said is true, lock him up, execute him. I don't care. He attacked children. He's attacking people who have nothing. Yeah, they're supporting Israel, but they're not actually the ones doing the raids. They're not the ones dropping the bombs. Again, this is a useless attack. This guy really consciously did this and planned it. He is a moron, because you're not going to accomplish anything by doing this except for hurting innocent people. You are going to get the language banned, as we're going to talk about here in a minute. You're going to continue to make Islam look in a favorable light. There's an unfavorable light. There's no advantages at all to doing this. But again, we're supposed to take responsibility. And they'll always say, well, Muslims didn't condemn it. I'll be the first. I'll always come out and say, yes, I condemn this. But at the same time, I shouldn't have to, because this guy doesn't represent me. I don't care if he's got a Muslim name. His behavior is not consistent with our teachings. So already on cue, immediately, there were cries from you-know-who, the media, filled with journalists, I'm sure, like Mr. Glenn Greenwald, and they're saying, let's label Free Palestine as a terrorist chant and a hate crime. Now, this hate crime thing is a whole other story altogether. When this thing came out years ago, I said this is for one purpose: it's to silence. It is to attack whites, which has been used and weaponized against whites. You see oftentimes white people beat by people who are chanting non-white slogans. They don't get charged with a hate crime. But if someone comes up and says death to Israel is a hate crime, even if he didn't commit a crime. So we can see it's been used to silence, been used to intimidate people basically who are undesirables. And now they're adding in, or trying to add in, Palestine, Free Palestine, as a hate crime. Very, very scary stuff. So again, you see how the game works. And if you're familiar with me, you've been here with me week after week, I've outlined it. So they denied stealing the land for almost a century. We uncovered in 9 hours how they did. We covered it all, from the beginnings all the way up to the 70s, how they stole the land, how they broke the international agreements, how the Palestinian people were given, just sold a whole bowl full of lies. They tried to remove the name. So first it was like, oh, no, we never did that. Rightfully belongs to us with the promise of Abraham, blah, blah, blah. We've all heard it. Little Israel trying to survive. Then they try to remove the name. Palestine cannot be used. It's not in the maps anymore. They just completely erased it. Palestine's not found in any school. In America, if you go to the maps, the geography, it's not there. So you remove that. And now even saying they have a right to having a state, is considered to be a terrorist chant. So this, again, is just how they incrementally move up. You're also seeing, predictably, that representatives are out there calling to stand with Israel. Another clever trick. See what this horrific guy did? We should excuse the bloodlust that's taking place in Gaza just because this guy was bad. And it's like, that's how they play with people's minds. This guy is a horrible piece of garbage. But we are not going to allow them to use this to pretend the Zionists aren't doing in Gaza what they're doing. Both are condemnable. But the big difference is, on one hand, you have a lone nut. On the other hand, you have a sponsored and funded government. That's a big, big difference. Any nut job out there can do a random, variety of things. But we're talking about sanctioned government attacks. That is a big difference. It's not the same. But they're going to use this. Oh, look, that guy, if you believe in Palestinian rights, statehood, to their own land that they've had for centuries, you're with that guy. You want to see children burn with a flamethrower. They are the masters of emotion and how to play that emotion. They'll show those clips and they'll just link Palestinian support with that guy. Very, very clever. And like I said, it is very, very convenient. And then without fail, the liberal media did what they always do initially until it's too hard to hide. They tried to blame white people for this. I mean, what? I mean, how do we even get, to this point? But MSNBC, and usual, they're comical. I mean, MSNBC is even worse than CNN. They came out and called him a white immigrant. Like initially, if you've seen this gentleman, I don't think he's what anyone would describe as a Caucasian person, but without fail, they're going to try to do that initially. It was a white guy. Let's ban white men, go after white men some more. They're anti-Semitic. Let's silence them and all of these things. Can't leave that one out. And then now, coming up this Tuesday, they are set to vote in the House on basically making blasphemy, or not making blasphemy laws, but making Free Palestine an anti-Semitic slogan. So it's going to be labeled as hate speech. And I have a feeling it's going to pass because this is how they do it. They take it when the iron is hot and they feed it. They slip that agenda right in there on you. And before you know it, flying a Palestinian flag, like you can't fly a Palestinian flag in good old Saudi Arabia, they'll take it and arrest you. You know, here now in America, the land of the free, land of free speech, here it goes again. And they've used Islam and played Muslims like a fiddle over the last couple decades here because they've gotten Muslims to promote blasphemy laws in the UK, all over Europe. Muslims are calling for removals of speech on anti-Islamic attacks and Quran burnings. And again, we in a Muslim society would never permit such things. But in the West, if you ban on that one, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to get limited blasphemy laws on Islam or Christianity. And you're going to get this, where anyone who says, okay, wait, the majority of the pornography directors are of Jewish origin, hate speech. The majority of the media moguls and media companies happen to be of a certain demographic, hate speech. And that's very scary. That's why I'm against blasphemy laws in the West. I let the Christians do what they want to do. I don't care. It's between them and the law. I don't watch the content. It's not my problem. They're clowns, most of them, not worthy of any of our attention. But I don't want to have my voice silenced when I'm pointing out who's doing this. And that's where it's going to go. And they've used Muslims and these phony leaders to come out here and advocate for this, where you know exactly where it's going to end up. Like an example, Sweden. Sweden is now saying they're going to ban religious schools because they don't want to have blasphemy against Muslims by Christians, and they want everybody to be Swedish. But guess who's exempt from those bans? If you guessed Judaism, you'd be correct. Jewish schools can still continue to exist because of anti-Semitism. They have a right to stay in their own community, but yet Christians and Muslims will share the same schools, and they'll have a secular education. Women will not be allowed to wear the hijab. Christian boys will not be allowed to wear the cross, but yet those people can still have their own school. This is where it's going. It's where it always goes. And we're seeing again here. And yeah, to move on to one of the last, it's kind of a side topic here I wanted to talk about because I saw this early in the week getting all over social media. And this is affecting a Muslim country and kind of reflects the state of the Ummah. We had basically a gentleman, Indian gentleman, Hindu, who was living in Turkey. He was a migrant. We're going to get to Turkey's situation. It's very dire, just like the West here as well. And he'd been doing a series of videos where he was mocking Turkish people. He was talking about Turkish women, you know, in a derogatory way. In fact, he even went as far as to say that he wanted to rape the tour guide. She was cute. There was another one, sorry, that was another guy that was affiliated with the main one. But you're seeing that these Hindu bloggers are doing these videos mocking the Turkish people, mocking their women, calling their women all kinds of derogatory names. And this is a gentleman again, and it sums up the problem in the West. The Turks are dealing with the same thing. He came to this country to live. He came there to work. Turkey did not go there and bring a red carpet and roll it out for him. They didn't airlift him there like the West does, where they go actually into these areas and bring them over here. He chose to come to Turkey. And what is he doing? He is spending time bashing the country that he came to. And of course, you know what's in order, what he should get. He should get a one-way ticket back to India, obviously. If you don't like it here, you don't like the Muslims, you don't like the Turkish people, go home. I don't think the Turkish people are going to miss you. Now, with some Pakistani brothers who knew who he was, and they turned him in, and he's been detained by Turkish authorities. And like I said, he should be getting a one-way ticket back to India. So again, but a lot of disturbing aspects from this came to light is the main reason I'm covering it. Why are Turkish women in a Muslim country being so open, spending so much time mingling with foreigners, because all these videos of this guy had Turkish women all around him who were there by choice. They were not forced. These are women who were openly commingling with this guy. These are supposed to be Muslim women, and they're gravitating toward a Hindu foreigner who is in their country, has no respect. He's mocking their men. He's mocking their history. He's calling them names. And because they're so craving of attention and this being modern and this dopamine release of being on camera and being famous, they're allowing themselves to just be degraded and humiliated. He's calling them all sorts of derogatory terms. And he's like, Andrew Tate, surrounded, like by women. And these are Muslim women. If it was in the West, it wouldn't be so alarming. But the fact that this is Muslim women are doing this is just disgusting. And like I said, there was another one. He was walking with the girls, a Turkish tour guide, and he was asking his audience in YouTube, YouTube will ban you for talking bad about COVID. They were kicking people off the platform left and right for exposing that lie. YouTube will ban you for just about anything these days. They didn't ban this guy. He was asking his audience, should I go rape her? She's cute. Why not? This type of thing, again, to a Muslim woman. And the downfall of Turkey is taking place in real time, much like the West, due to mass integration and the adoption of liberal policies. And as I talked about before with birth rates, let's just wring this out a little bit. The birth rate in Turkey fell to 1.47 per woman in 2024. Every year, it has been declining over the last decade. Turkey is also breaking records for their divorce rates. They are getting divorced at higher and higher rates. It's the same thing you're seeing in the West. The women are being liberated as they think. They're divorcing their husbands. You're seeing them not having kids. They're pursuing material gains and luxuries. And this was the former head of the Khalifa. This was the Ottomans. This was a powerful Islamic empire, good and bad. But this is a fall of a Muslim state. It mirrors everything we're seeing in Saudi Arabia, what we're seeing in the Emirates. Birth rates down, divorces up, women being more and more promiscuous, hijabs are gone. There was even a video I saw recently where there was a Turkish Islamic presenter, if you will, and he was going out and asking young Turkish boys, could they even recite Surah Fatiha? Most of them could not do it. And he cried at the end of the video because he's just like, what's happening here? Just again, total destruction. So where this goes. If you've been following me, that's how they do it. They market the liberalism. They liberate your females through feminism. They break up the family. The birth rates drop. Then what do they tell you? Sorry, buddy, you need immigrants. And the government starts bringing in the immigrants by the truckloads. In the United States, we're bringing them in by the cargo ship loads. In England, everywhere the same thing. But you're seeing again here, a place you don't really associate with immigration is now being flooded. Almost 8% of Turkey's total population is immigrant. It's like they're losing their character. They're losing their nation. You got guys like this, coming in. And this Indian migrant, he was so confident, like they are in the West, to say these things on camera. They have no problem doing it. You can go to Twitter and see the Indians all the time telling you, we're taking over your jobs. We're not going to hire you. And that's true if you look at their hiring practices. It's not lying. But that's just how confident they are in saying these things. They speak with disdain for the countries that they live in. And most importantly, the people. Again, you hate the Turkish people. Why are you here? You hate Islam. Why are you here? It's the same reason they come to America when they hate us. It's for economic exploitation. But at least the Turkish authorities in this story did apparently act, and most likely he's going to be deported for indecency, sent back to India where he belongs. But again, if this happened in the West, he'd be called a victim. You'd hear cries about the injustices that caused him to think that way. They blame us. They say we're just so horrible to him that he looked at our women, he looked at our society, our religion that way. We owe him money. And the Western governments will probably give him money. They probably say, sir, we violated your civil liberties. Here's a house and here's some unlimited food stamps. It's just a joke, but at least there's some sanity, left in Turkey. Now, again, to make this a little bit clear, I talked about, I was going to reference this earlier. And when you want to look at what kind of people they're letting in by letting in these Indian migrants, I want to look now at, these are the favorability ratings for Israel globally. Now, when I cite a number, that's the percent of the population that views the state of Israel as unfavorable. So it's not the positive, it's the unfavorable. So Turkey as a whole, 97% view Israel unfavorably. The 3%, it's safe to say, they're the liberal Turks and the immigrants. We're going to get to who the immigrants are. Again, we talked about that Indian gentleman. Japan, 79% unfavorable. Netherlands, 78%. Spain, 75%. This is very positive for the Ummah, positive for the awakening. Greece, 72%. Italy, 66%. Germany, 64%. Lots of propaganda and brainwashing has gone on for half a century in Germany. That's why the number is not as high as it should be. France, 63%, big liberal country there. Kind of surprising France isn't higher with the amount of Muslim immigrants they have. And the French people typically used to be Catholic Christian, which is always kind of, they're not the Zio Christians you see in the West. So that was a bit surprising. Poland, 62%, United Kingdom, 61%, South Korea, unfavorable, 60%, Canada, 60%, United States, 53%. That number used to be, when I grew up, it was like 25%. So we are seeing a lot of positive. But now let's get to the last one. India, 29%. And I guarantee that they're the good Muslim brothers that we do have in India. 29%. That means almost, probably safe to say, when you match that to the total Muslim population, it's pretty much only the Muslims in India. It's like the rest of the Hindus are almost 100%. They love the state of Israel. And a Muslim country is like, hey, come on in, buddy. Welcome in. And then you're surprised when he curses you. You're surprised when he curses your women. You're surprised when he speaks about you with disdain. You think, when you look at numbers like this, the only major country with a high favorable rating for Israel is India. Indian migration has caused problems in the masses wherever it has gone. You look at the destruction of Canada. Why are Muslim countries going on this same suicidal path? Have they not learned from the West, or are their leadership all in it the same as ours are? I think you could pretty much guess by now the answer to that. It's about demographic destruction. It's about wage destruction. It's about quality of life destruction. It's a race to the bottom. These elite, they love what India is. They love seeing less than 1% up here in palaces owning everything, while the rest of the masses live in squalor and dilapidated buildings and huts. They love that. And they're dreaming to bring it here. And they've already brought it to parts of Canada, to the UK, and it's coming to the United States as well, because these people work for next to nothing, which suppresses the wages. It's going to do it to Turkey. It's done it to England. It's done it to America. I've seen it firsthand in Saudi Arabia, the way they killed profession after profession because of how low they're willing to work. A lot of that has to do with the currency conversion. So again, imagine what kind of person would have a favorable view towards Israel. I mean, you just have to be either brainwashed, which will give you a pardon on that. Maybe you haven't been exposed to information. That's the case in a lot of Westerners. They really don't know. Or in your heart, you are just evil. Because there is no way anyone can say that Israel has stood for anything good in its history. It's been nothing but war. It's been nothing but tyranny. It's never helped any nations when it came to aid. You look at every time there's a natural disaster and a hurricane, go look at how much money Israel is donating to these countries. Next to nothing. What positive mark has that place left on humanity? If you're someone who supports it, you've got a blackness in your heart, and that's just not even, that's fact. No other conclusion, can be drawn from that besides, like I said earlier, being misled, being brainwashed, not having all the information. But to have a result that high is disturbing. And these are not people that any Muslim nation should be welcoming in. It is a one-way, it's a suicide. You just go ahead and load the bullets in and press and trigger the gun. That's it. You're marching to your own funeral pyre at this point. So very disturbing connection there. So I'm going to close with the news for the week on that. Next week, as promised, inshallah, we will start the Synagogue of Satan series, where we are going to chronicle the rise of these people, how they got where they got, all the tricks along the way. We're going to introduce to a lot of historical figures, lots of things you probably don't know, lots of things maybe you do know, but we're going to connect a lot of dots, and we're going to begin that series. And once we begin it, I don't know how long it's going to be. It is going to be quite a few weeks, definitely, maybe not as long as the Palestine series, or maybe around the same length. So we're going to be turning to that and really chronicling this journey. We're going to go on a long, strange journey full of manipulation, backroom deals, and ultimately subversion, how they were able to take over these societies and get to the position they're in today, to where they're about to ban the saying "Free Palestine," where they control our money, they control our media, and they pretty much run this world. And we're going to go through that very long and strange and eerie, untold tale of history. So we got time for questions.